Hi everyone, my name is Paula. I'm a pediatric dietitian. I'm live with you here on Your Baby Club. I'm sorry I'm a few minutes after 2, but let me know if you have any weaning questions. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about weaning, baby nutrition, toddlers, feeding babies, feeding toddlers. So type up, send me your questions, and I'd be really happy to answer any of those. So I'll be here for the next 20-25 minutes or so, answering any questions that you may have. So if you're about to start weaning or you've just started weaning your baby, then send me your questions. If you're struggling with anything or you're confused over anything, then let me know what questions you have. So I know it can be a really exciting time when you start introducing solids to your little baby, but it can also be quite confusing. There's lots of information out there and you're not sure what information is correct or who to trust. So I'm a dietitian with 20 years experience, and I've been working with families and children for all of that time. So I've worked with many different families over the years, helping them introduce solids to their babies. So yeah, it's always really important to just check the person that you're taking advice from, just to make sure that that's a qualified health professional that you are speaking to. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I'm just having a look down here if we've got anything coming through. Okay, brilliant. I can see lots of you have joined, so welcome. I'll just say, introduce myself again. My name is Paula. I'm a children's or pediatric dietitian, and I've worked in many London hospitals, children's hospitals, working with lots and lots of families over the years, helping them with their baby and children's nutrition. So one of the common questions I get asked, so I'll start with that one. A lot of people ask me, when is the right time to start weaning my baby? How old should my baby be? Do I have to wait until they're exactly 6 months? What is the best time to start weaning? And so the answer is that there isn't an exact age for everyone. Around 6 months is the advice from the Department of Health, but there is some flexibility in that. So what we would say is you should look for 4 signs of developmental readiness to check whether your baby is ready to start solids. So you don't necessarily need to look at the calendar and see exactly their calendar age, but rather try to look at your baby and see what they are doing, see what their development is like, to see if they are ready to start solids. Okay, so there are 4 things to look for. The first thing to look for is whether your baby can sit up on their own. Okay, so it doesn't have to be completely unaided, but they should be able to sit up with minimal support. So within a high chair, they can have some support around them, but they shouldn't be flopping over and they shouldn't be hunched forwards. They should be able to have core control so that they can sit up. That's really important for when you're taking in food. The second sign is when your baby's able to sit up is also that they can hold their neck and their head upright. So that's also really important. You can imagine if you're swallowing foods that you really need to be able to hold your head and neck steady. So they need to have control of their muscles in the neck. And the third thing is looking out for the sign that your baby can pick something up, look at something, pick it up and bring it to their mouth. So for example, you might see that with various toys that they're playing with, teething toys, or other types of toys. If they're able to look, so focus on that, pick it up with their fist and bring it up to their mouth, that's another sign that they're ready to start taking solids. And the fourth sign to look for is that your baby is able to swallow food. So obviously people ask me, well, how do you know this if we haven't given them food yet? Which is a very good question. And the way to look for that is to to check that your baby's lost the tongue thrust reflex, which is instead of your baby just sticking their tongue forwards and backwards, sticking their tongue out, they're able to actually move the food to the back of their mouth and swallow it. So if babies, when they first start solids, are just spitting everything out, they may not be quite ready for solids. Some of the food will obviously come out, but if everything is sort of coming out and none of it is being moved to the back of their mouth, they might not be quite ready. So somewhere between the age of 4 and 6 months, babies will start to lose that tongue thrust reflex, or it won't be as strong. And that's another sign that they are ready to start eating some foods. Okay, so I can see we've got some questions coming through. So thank you for that. There's a question from someone asking about their toddler. So how much should my toddler be eating every day? Okay, so that's a very difficult question and a very general question to answer. So obviously I can't give an answer saying that your toddler should be eating this exact amount. So what I would say is be guided by your baby and your toddler and their appetite. Okay, so appetites are going to vary from day to day depending on if they are teething, if they have an illness, if they are tired, or equally if they're having a growth spurt, they might have an increase in their appetite. So appetites vary from day to day, so don't expect your toddler to be eating the same amount every single day. You know yourself, some days you feel hungrier than others, so you can't expect them to be eating the same amount every day. So the way we would monitor whether children are having enough to eat is by looking at their growth chart, so monitoring their growth, both their weight and their length or height, and plotting that on a growth chart and seeing if they are tracking on their particular percentile or line on the growth chart. And that gives us a good idea if they are getting enough energy and protein for their growth. So I would say a toddler offering 3 meals and 2 snacks a day, spread out around every 2 or 3 hours, offering something to eat, is enough for that kind of age, and then just be guided by your toddler in terms of their appetite. Some days they might want a bit more, and other days they will eat less, so be guided by their appetite. Start off with giving them a small amount, and if they finish all of that, you can always give them some more after that. And in the long term, looking at a child's growth over time, over many months, can give us an idea if they are having enough. So I hope that that answers your question. So just checking here, I've got some more questions coming in. At what age can I start giving my little one what we eat at meal times? Okay, so it depends what you're eating. So obviously we want to include babies and young children in the meal times as early as possible. So right from the beginning of weaning, they can come and sit with you, even if they're not eating every meal at every meal time like you are. They can still come sit with you. They can play with their teething toys, and that teaches them skills of bringing up things to their mouth and moving them around in their mouth and using their muscles around their mouth. So really from weaning you can start bringing them to the table, and in terms of giving them what you eat, you can also start giving them things that you eat from really early on, but the things that you need to look out for or watch out for are that you're not giving your baby or toddler any added sugar or salt. So if you've made something that's got added salt in it, take out a portion for your toddler before you add the salt, or your baby before you add the salt, because that can be a way of giving them something that you're eating, but without the added salt and sugar. So and obviously the texture just depends by toddler they should be having lots of different textures, sort of chopped up texture of what you're eating. Younger babies, you might need to be a bit careful of the texture, so if you're giving them some finger foods, just making sure it's really soft and you're able to sort of squish the food between your fingers, which means they'll be able to mash it with their gums. So really you can give your baby anything that you're eating at your mealtime right from the beginning, but just watching out for salt and sugar and making sure it's appropriate texture. Okay, so I hope that helps. Okay, so we have another question coming in here. Should my 18-month-old be eating snacks between meals? If so, how many should they be having and what sort of snack? Okay, so snacks, we usually recommend introducing those from around 12 months or a year of age. Babies don't really need snacks. Their sort of snacks are their milk feeds, so their breastfeeds or their formula feeds. But when a baby gets to over a year of age, you can start introducing food snacks. And so an 18-month-old, I would expect they would be having 2 snacks a day, so mid-morning and mid-afternoon. So one snack between breakfast and lunch, and then another snack between lunch and the evening meal. So I would leave an appropriate amount of time between those so that it's not too close to one of the other meals. But equally, it's quite a long time for toddlers to go from lunchtime at say 12 o'clock to dinner time at say 5:30. It's quite a long time to be going without food. So every 2.5 to 3 hours, I would expect that they would need something to eat. So offering them either a meal or a snack every 2.5 to 3 hours is an appropriate time. And in terms of so I would say 2 snacks a day as well as the 3 meals. And what sort of snack should they be having? Depends very much what they're eating in the other meals, but typically I advise people to try and include around 2 or 3 different things in a snack. So for example, if you're giving them say some breadsticks, just breadsticks on their own is not that filling, and you could add some nutrition to it by adding something with protein. So for example, some hummus, so like breadsticks and hummus, or small little pieces of pita bread and hummus is a great snack. Another example, you could give some fruit, but to go alongside the fruit, you could give some peanut butter or nut butter to go with the fruit, just to make it a bit more substantial, a bit more filling, and also include lots of nutrients when you're adding in those things. Other examples, you could give maybe half a slice or even a quarter of a slice of toast with some cream cheese. You could give some veggies dipped in hummus or some other kind of dip, like a black bean dip or something like that. You could give some cheese and fruit. So trying to give either a fruit or vegetable and possibly a carbohydrate snack and some protein. So 2 to 3 of those different food groups included in a snack. If your little one hasn't had much milk, they could have a small glass, a small cup, about 100 mils or so, 120 mils of milk, with maybe some fruit alongside that, half a banana or something like that. So keep the snacks quite small, and if you notice that your child finishes everything that you've given at a snack and they are really hungry, you could give a little bit more, but remember to leave enough of a gap between the snack and the meal time so that they have built up an appetite for the next meal. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. Next one we've got here is asking about cutlery. Okay, should we be using special cutlery when weaning and going forwards? There seems to be so many in the shops. Okay, yeah, it's a really good question. You don't necessarily need to be using sort of special cutlery, but there are a lot of quite helpful baby and toddler cutlery out there, which can really encourage your little one to feed themselves and to get involved in the meal, in the food and the meal time. So there are a lot of cutlery that helps with, obviously babies and young children have got smaller hands, so there's a lot of cutlery that helps in terms of them being able to grip or hold those particular cutlery quite well. So there's one, I've got a little drawer here where I keep things. There's one that I recommend for early weaning, which really helps in terms of self-feeding, encouraging self-feeding, and that's a spoon called a dip spoon. from Cogni Kids. So you can see it's got like a silicone bit here, and it's quite bumpy. And if you stick that in, if baby sticks that in like any kind of puree or porridge or anything like that, the food will sort of stick around this bit here, and then they can bring it to their mouth and lick the food off, and it's a good way of encouraging them to self-feed. There's some other brands that colleagues of mine also recommend. There's one called Doddle, which has got really nice small cutlery that's sort of quite fat, so it doesn't really matter the particular brand, but what you're looking for is something that's small and that is quite thick, so your baby can hold on to it, and potentially something like silicone or something on it that they can grip onto, because they're still developing their motor skills, and their fine motor skills aren't that well controlled yet. So you don't have, and then of course their hands. So I know that's not cutlery, but I'd really encourage you to let your baby and your toddler use their hands, get messy, get stuck into food, because that really helps them to learn about the different feel of food, the textures, the smells, and getting food from the tray or the plate to their mouth. Often their hands is a good way of doing that. So don't worry about their sort of manners or table manners at first. Really what we want is children to experience the food. We want them to smell it, to touch it, to lick it, and that helps them accept different foods. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. Okay, hi, so I got a question from Ilem. My daughter's over 2 years and she's still breastfeeding. I try a few times with her to stop, but she keeps crying for a long time. Okay, so the World Health Organization recommends breastfeeding till 2 years and beyond if mum and the toddler are still happy for that to happen. If you're wanting to stop yourself, I'd recommend speaking to a lactation consultant. This is not my stopping breastfeeding is not my really specialist area. So there are various different ways of going about it in terms of gradually weaning your little one off breastfeeds. So there's a colleague of mine, Stacey Zimmels, that you can find on Facebook and Instagram, and she's a lactation consultant, IBCLC, and so have a look for her. Her page is called Feed, Eat, Speak, and she's got some great advice on stopping breastfeeding. I know she's got a specific post on Instagram on if mums want to stop breastfeeding and how to support that. So have a look for that. Okay, so a question from Natalie. Thank you. What are the signs that baby is ready for weaning? Okay, so I mentioned this at the beginning, but I'll just go over it. So there are 4 signs that they're ready. The first one is that they're able to sit up, mostly unaided, so with a little bit of support. They shouldn't be sort of hunched forwards or falling over to the side. The second one is that they're able to hold up their neck and their head steady, that they've got enough muscle control there. The third one is that they're able to look at food, pick it up and bring it to their mouth, so they have that enough coordination to do that. And the fourth one is the loss of the tongue thrust reflex. So when babies are born, they have the tongue thrust reflex, which is when the tongue just goes in and out, and that's to support breastfeeding or bottle feeding. But as babies start weaning, obviously we want them to have foods and things of different texture. And so if you start weaning really, really early, baby will just move all the food out of the mouth. But as they get more ready for weaning, they'll be able to move the food from the front of the mouth to the back of the mouth and to swallow it. So look out for those 4 signs. Okay, so really good question here. At what point should I try to introduce foods like peanuts and other foods that could cause an allergy? It makes me so nervous. Okay, that's a really good question. So thank you for that. I know it can make people really, really nervous, the thought of introducing things like peanuts, eggs, other tree nuts, things like that. So I'll just tell you a little bit more about this. So many years ago, about 15-20 years ago, the advice used to be to avoid giving things like peanuts, tree nuts. I have to say this is obviously not whole nuts, so we're talking about the nut butters or ground nuts, so an appropriate texture for babies. Whole nuts are a choking hazard until at least 4 or 5 years of age. But in the past, about 20 years ago, it was advised to not give any peanuts or tree nuts until at least 2 or 3 years of age, because it was thought that giving the nuts could actually increase the risk of food allergies. But there's been a number of studies, and one in particular, the LEAP study, excellent, very, very high quality study, has shown very conclusively that giving peanuts in the form of peanut butter or ground nuts, or you also get bamba, which is like peanut puffs. So giving peanuts in an appropriate form to babies early on in the weaning period can actually help prevent them from developing food allergies later on. So if your baby is the time that we would recommend doing that is after you've given the first taste. So when your baby has got all those signs of developmental readiness and you think they're ready to start weaning, I would start with vegetables, particularly green and white, bitter and sort of neutral tasting vegetables at first for about the first 1 to 2 weeks. Then you could start adding in things like some grains and cereals, porridges, that type of thing. And so once they've established on weaning for a couple of weeks, that is when we would start introducing the allergens, starting with egg and then peanuts. So egg, you could use a hard-boiled egg and mash or puree that down, and then give a little small amount into some previously tolerated foods that they've had. Peanuts, you could use watered down, like thinned down peanut butter. So smooth peanut butter, obviously no whole bits of peanut in it. Crunchy peanut butter would be a choking hazard. And with smooth peanut butter, we recommend thinning it down slightly, because the extremely thick peanut butters can be a choking hazard as well, because they're so thick and can get sort of stuck to babies, the roof of their mouth. So thinning it down a little bit and stirring it into some porridge or other vegetable or fruit puree that they've had, or spreading it onto a piece of banana or a piece of toast or something like that they've had previously. So that's how I would recommend introducing it. So as soon as you've introduced the first tastes, initial vegetables and some cereals, then you can start introducing things like peanuts. And what we would advise is when you start introducing it, to introduce these allergens one at a time earlier in the day. So if there is any problem, if there is any reaction, you can spot it. Not when your baby's unwell. If they have eczema, don't introduce it if their eczema is really, really out of control and very, very red and angry. Then speak to your doctor first about getting that under control. And when your baby's unwell, we don't want to be introducing new things to them as well. So I hope that's helpful. If babies are considered at higher risk, at increased risk of a food allergy, so if they have early onset eczema, especially before the age of 3 months, especially if their eczema is quite severe and needs steroid cream for treatment, or if it's not easily controlled, and if they have another food allergy, for example, a cow's milk protein allergy. So if they have that early onset eczema or another food allergy, they are considered at increased risk for developing another allergy. And that is when peanuts and eggs should be introduced earlier, so from 4 months of age, because it's felt that those babies benefit more from the earlier introduction. So if you think that is your baby, that your baby's at higher increased risk of developing an allergy because they have early onset eczema or another food allergy, really recommend speaking to a doctor, particularly your allergy team, as early as possible. So when they're sort of 2 or 3 months old, already start discussing it, so that you have a plan by the time they get to that sort of 4 months of age. Okay, so I hope that really helps. I'll just take one more question. Sorry, because I started a little bit late, and then I'm going to be heading over to Instagram. So if I haven't answered your question here, you can come join me on Instagram live if I haven't answered it here. So Helen, thank you. Weaning is making my 6-month-old constipated. Is this normal? We've tried puree food with him every other day. The constipation only affects him at night. He'll wake up screaming. Oh, so I'm sorry to hear that. It's really horrible to see your baby in pain when they're really struggling with that. So it is quite normal for the baby's stools, their poo to go a little bit to change when you start introducing foods, when you start weaning. We obviously don't want them to be completely constipated and not able to open their bowels, but it is normal for their the color and the consistency of their stools to change slightly, so to thicken up a bit more than it was previously. So 6-month-old. So I would look at, speak to your health visitor about the volume of fluid that you're giving. So still don't decrease the amount of milk, formula or breastfeeds that you're giving. So still give a good amount of volume of formula or breast milk to your baby so that they're not dropping their fluid intake at all. And then things that can help with constipation are things like particular types of fruits that have got certain fruit sugars in them that draw water into the bowel. So things like plums, apricots, prunes, peaches, pears, those types of things. Particularly, you could stew them, cook them, and stir them into some porridge or things that you're giving already. If you're still struggling, your baby's struggling, please speak to your GP. They might need some further treatment or in investigation. So do speak to your GP and your health visitor as well. Okay, so I hope that's been helpful. It's been really great answering your questions. I've really enjoyed answering all your questions, and I hope it's been really helpful for you. So head over to Instagram if you still haven't had any of your questions answered, and I'll pick them up there. But I hope you really enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.